I was folding Mrs. Chen's silk blouses in the upstairs bedroom when I heard Emma's labored breathing through the baby monitor. That terrible rattling wheeze that made my own chest tighten with fear. I had no idea that the decision I would make in the next 72 hours, using money I'd been saving for my own mother's surgery back in the Philippines, would set in motion a chain of events that wouldn't fully unfold for another 23 years. I didn't know that the sick little girl struggling to breathe in the nursery down the hall would one day become Dr. Emma Chen, head of pediatric pulmonology at Stanford Medical Center, or that she would accidentally discover what I'd done and track me down to repay a debt I never expected to collect. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I always love seeing our global community come together. If you enjoy stories about sacrifice, hidden kindness, and how compassion can echo across decades, make sure to hit that like button right now and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these inspiring true stories. Now, let me take you back to that autumn evening in 1998 when I was just Maria Santos, a 26-year-old housekeeper in Palo Alto, California, trying to save enough money to bring my mother to America for the heart surgery that might save her life. The Chen family had hired me 6 months earlier, just after Emma was born. I remember Mrs. Chen's advertisement in the Filipino Community Center, handwritten on yellow paper that was starting to curl at the edges. Seeking live-in housekeeper, private room, fair wages, family with newborn. I had called from a payphone, my English still halting and uncertain, my hands shaking as I dialed because I needed this job so desperately. My mother's doctor in Manila had given us a timeline, 6 months, maybe 8 if we were lucky, and the surgery that could repair her damaged heart valve cost more money than I could imagine earning in my lifetime. But America was supposed to be the land of opportunity, the place where hard work could overcome any obstacle, and I had come here with nothing but determination and a dream of saving her life. Mr. and Mrs. Chen were both software engineers at a startup that would later become one of Silicon Valley's success stories. Though back then, they were just 2 exhausted new parents trying to navigate the overwhelming reality of caring for a premature baby with serious health complications. Emma had been born 6 weeks early, her tiny lungs underdeveloped, and she'd spent the first month of her life in the NICU, hooked up to machines that breathed for her. Even after they brought her home, she needed constant monitoring, medications that cost hundreds of dollars each month, and frequent visits to specialists who charged fees that made Mrs. Chen's face go pale when she opened the bills. I loved that little girl from the moment I first held her. She was so small, barely 6 pounds when they brought her home, with a shock of black hair and eyes that seemed to look right into your soul. My own mother had always told me that babies could sense kindness, that they knew instinctively who would protect them and who would harm them, and Emma would calm in my arms when she wouldn't settle for anyone else. I would walk her around the house at 3 in the morning when her breathing grew labored, singing Filipino lullabies my mother had sung to me, feeling her tiny heart beating against my chest like a frightened bird. Those were the hours when I would pray, asking God to let this child live, to give her the chance to grow up and experience all the beauty the world had to offer. The Chens were kind employers, kinder than many of my friends who worked as housekeepers had found. They treated me with respect, always said please and thank you. And Mrs. Chen would sometimes sit with me in the kitchen after Emma was asleep, sharing stories about her own childhood in Taiwan and asking about my family in the Philippines. She knew about my mother's condition because I had mentioned it during my interview, explaining why I needed to save as much money as possible. "We'll help you however we can," she had promised, and I believed her because her eyes were sincere and warm. But as the months passed, I began to notice the stress lines deepening around both their eyes. The startup was struggling, their promised stock options suddenly uncertain, and the medical bills for Emma's care were mounting faster than their insurance could cover. I would see Mrs. Chen at the kitchen table late at night, calculator in hand, moving numbers around like puzzle pieces that wouldn't quite fit together. I would find Mr. Chen in his home office, staring at spreadsheets with an expression of quiet desperation. They never complained to me, never made their financial stress my burden, but I could see it in the way they started buying generic groceries instead of name brands, in how they stopped going out to dinner on Friday nights, in the careful way they discussed whether they could afford to replace their aging car. Emma's medication was the biggest expense. She needed 3 different prescriptions to manage her lung condition, and even with insurance, the copays were substantial. I remember the day Mrs. Chen came home from the pharmacy with tears streaming down her face, clutching a paper bag that should have contained Emma's inhaled corticosteroid, but was empty because their insurance had denied coverage for that particular formulation. "They say we need prior authorization," she told her husband, her voice breaking. "The doctor submitted it twice already, but it keeps getting rejected. They want her to try the cheaper version first, but Dr. Morrison said that one doesn't work as well for her type of condition. Without the medication, her lungs could be permanently damaged." I stood in the doorway to the kitchen, pretending to wipe down counters that were already clean, my heart breaking as I watched Mr. Chen pull his wife into his arms. "We'll figure it out," he murmured, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Maybe I can pick up some freelance consulting work on the weekends. Or we could take out a loan against the house." That night, after they had gone to bed, I sat in my small room off the kitchen and looked at the envelope hidden in my dresser drawer beneath my winter sweaters. Inside was $3,200, every penny I had managed to save in the 18 months since arriving in America. I had been so careful, setting aside money from each paycheck, taking on extra cleaning jobs on my days off, eating rice and vegetables while the Chens had meat with their dinners. My mother's surgery cost $12,000, and at my current rate of saving, I would have enough in another 2 years, maybe less if I could find additional work. The doctors in Manila had said she could wait that long, probably, though her condition was deteriorating and time was not on our side. I took out the envelope and counted the bills, my hands trembling slightly in the dim light from my bedside lamp. The medication Emma needed cost $450 for a month's supply without insurance coverage. If I paid for it, I would be setting back my own mother's surgery by months. If I didn't pay for it, Emma's lungs might suffer permanent damage that could affect her for the rest of her life. She was just a baby, innocent and helpless, and I had held her in my arms and promised to keep her safe. My mother's voice echoed in my memory, words she had spoken to me countless times throughout my childhood. "Maria, the measure of a person's character is what they do when no one is watching, when there is no reward and no recognition. We help others not because of what we might gain, but because it is right, because we are all connected, because someone else's suffering diminishes us all." She had lived by those words, my mother, sharing her food with neighbors who had less, taking in stray animals, giving away her own clothes to women who needed them more. She had raised me to understand that compassion was not a luxury, but a necessity, that we survived as a species because we cared for one another. I thought about Emma's tiny face, the way she smiled when I sang to her, the trust in her eyes when I held her. I thought about Mrs. Chen's tears and Mr. Chen's desperate determination to provide for his family. I thought about my own mother, waiting in Manila, her heart growing weaker with each passing day. The choice before me felt impossible, a terrible equation with no right answer. Save the child in front of me, or save my own mother. Choose present suffering or future loss. Act now or wait and hope. But even as I wrestled with the decision, I knew what I would do. I had already known from the moment I heard Mrs. Chen crying in the kitchen. My mother would understand. She would be disappointed if I did anything else. "You saved the child, Maria," I could hear her saying, as clearly as if she were standing beside me in that small room. "You always save the child." The next morning, I waited until the Chens had left for work and Emma was napping peacefully in her crib. I took $450 from my envelope, feeling the weight of those bills in my hand, feeling the weight of what they represented. This was 3 months of extra work, 3 months of my mother's life, 3 months closer to bringing her to safety. I put the money in my purse and walked to the pharmacy, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The pharmacist was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who recognized me from my previous visits to pick up Emma's other prescriptions. "Can I help you?" she asked, and I slid the prescription across the counter, the one Mrs. Chen had left on the kitchen table with a note to herself to call the insurance company again on Monday. "I need to fill this," I said, my English carefully practiced. "I pay cash." She looked at the prescription, then at me, her eyebrows rising slightly. "This is expensive without insurance coverage," she warned. $450 for a 30-day supply. "I know," I said, and opened my purse to show her the money. "I have it." She processed the prescription without further comment, though I saw curiosity in her eyes. When she handed me the white paper bag with Emma's name on it, I felt a strange mixture of relief and grief. I had done the right thing. I knew I had done the right thing, but I had also just pushed my mother's surgery months further into the uncertain future. I couldn't tell the Chens what I had done. If I told them, they would insist on paying me back, and they didn't have the money. They would feel guilty and indebted, and that would change the comfortable dynamic of our relationship. They would see me differently, not as their housekeeper, but as their benefactor. And that shift would make everything awkward and strange. So I said nothing. I simply placed the medication in the cabinet where Emma's other prescriptions were kept. And when Mrs. Chen came home from work that evening and saw it, her face transformed with confusion and then joy. "The insurance approved it?" she asked her husband, grabbing his arm. "When did they call? Why didn't you tell me?" Mr. Chen looked equally baffled. "They didn't call me. I thought maybe they called you." They spent the next 20 minutes trying to solve the mystery, calling the pharmacy, calling the insurance company, calling the doctor's office. Everyone at the pharmacy confirmed that the prescription had been filled and paid for in cash that morning. The insurance company confirmed they had not approved coverage. The doctor's office confirmed they had not submitted a new prior authorization request. It was a mystery with no solution, and eventually the Chens simply accepted it as an inexplicable piece of good fortune, a bureaucratic error in their favor, a small miracle in a time when they desperately needed one. I watched them celebrate over dinner that night, saw the relief in their faces, heard the joy in their voices as they discussed how this meant they could afford to fix the car after all, how maybe they could even take a small vacation next summer. Emma sat in her high chair, babbling happily, her breathing easier now that she had the medication she needed. I felt a deep sense of peace despite the sacrifice I had made. This was what my mother had taught me. This was what it meant to be human. But the medication was only a 30-day supply, and the insurance company continued to deny coverage. The next month, I paid again. And the month after that. And the month after that. Each time I took the money from my envelope, watching my savings dwindle, watching my mother's surgery slip further and further away. Each time I filled the prescription and placed it in the cabinet, and each time the Chens marveled at their continued good fortune, at whatever glitch in the system was providing them with this expensive medication month after month. I found ways to save more money. I stopped buying new clothes entirely, wearing my 2 pairs of jeans and 3 shirts until they were thin and faded. I ate even more simply, rice and eggs and whatever vegetables were on sale. I took on more cleaning jobs, working 7 days a week, sending every extra dollar back to Manila to help with my mother's other medical expenses. The appointments and tests and medications that kept her alive while we waited for the surgery that seemed to recede further into the distance with each passing month. Mrs. Chen noticed that I looked tired and urged me to rest more, to take better care of myself. She didn't know that I was working 12-hour days, that I was barely sleeping, that I was sacrificing my own health and my own mother's future for her daughter's present. How could she know? I had made sure she would never know. 6 months after I started paying for Emma's medication, my mother died. The call came at 4 a.m, my sister's voice crackling across the long-distance line, telling me that Mama had collapsed in the kitchen and was gone before the ambulance arrived. Heart failure. Sudden and complete. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. The phone still pressed to my ear and felt something break inside me that I knew would never fully heal. I couldn't afford to fly home for the funeral. The ticket cost more than I had saved, more than I could borrow. I mourned alone in my small room, crying silently so I wouldn't wake the Chens, feeling the weight of my choice crushing down on me. I had saved Emma's lungs but lost my mother's life. I had chosen a stranger's child over my own flesh and blood. I had done what I thought was right, what my mother would have wanted me to do, but the cost of that righteousness felt unbearable. Mrs. Chen found me crying in the laundry room 2 days later, and I couldn't hide my grief anymore. I told her my mother had died, though I didn't tell her why I hadn't been able to afford the surgery that might have saved her. She held me while I sobbed, this kind woman who had trusted me with her most precious treasure, and she told me to take time off, to grieve, to heal. But I couldn't take time off. I needed to work. I needed the distraction. I needed to feel like my mother's death had meant something, like the choice I had made had been worth the terrible price. Emma's lung condition gradually improved over the following years. The expensive medication did its job, allowing her lungs to develop properly, preventing the permanent damage that would have occurred without treatment. By the time she was 3 years old, she no longer needed the costly prescription. The Chen's financial situation also improved as their startup began to succeed, and they were able to afford better insurance and cover Emma's medical expenses without the strain that had characterized those early years. They never knew that I had been the one paying for their daughter's medication during those crucial months. They never knew about the sacrifice I had made, or the mother I had lost while trying to save their child. I continued working for the Chen family for another 5 years, watching Emma grow from a fragile infant into a bright, curious little girl who loved books and asked endless questions about everything. She would follow me around the house, chattering about her day at preschool, showing me pictures she had drawn, asking me to read her stories in my accented English. I loved her fiercely, this child I had helped save, though she would never know it. She called me Auntie Maria, and when she wrapped her small arms around my neck and told me she loved me, I felt my mother's presence in the room, felt her approval, felt her understanding of why I had made the choice I did. Eventually, I left the Chen's employment to care for my own sister's children after she became ill. Mrs. Chen cried when I told her I was leaving, and Emma cried too, clinging to my legs and begging me not to go. We promised to stay in touch, and we did for a while, Christmas cards and occasional phone calls, but as the years passed and life moved forward, we gradually lost contact. I heard through mutual friends that Emma had grown into a brilliant student, that she had gone to Stanford for college, that she was studying medicine. I felt proud of her accomplishments, proud that the little girl whose life I had helped save was now dedicating her own life to saving others. 23 years passed. I was 49 years old, working as a hospice care nurse, having finally completed my nursing degree after years of night school and determination. I had never married, had never had children of my own, though I had helped raise my sister's 3 kids after she recovered from her illness. I lived simply in a small apartment in San Jose, sending money back to the Philippines to support my extended family, finding satisfaction in my work, caring for the dying and their families. I had not thought about the Chen family in years when I received a phone call one Tuesday afternoon from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was a telemarketer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Is this Maria Santos? The voice was female, educated, with just a hint of an accent that suggested Asian heritage. Yes, this is Maria, I said, stirring the soup I was making for dinner. My name is Dr. Emma Chen. I don't know if you remember me, but you worked for my family when I was very young. You were our housekeeper. I nearly dropped the phone. Emma, little Emma, who I had held in my arms and sung to sleep. Emma, whose life I had helped save with money meant for my own mother's surgery. Emma, I breathed. Of course I remember you. How are you? Your mother told me you became a doctor. I'm well, she said, and I could hear emotion in her voice. I'm actually calling because I need to see you. There's something I discovered recently, something important that I need to talk to you about in person. Would you be willing to meet me for coffee tomorrow? My heart began to beat faster. Had she somehow found out about the medication? But how could she? It had been more than 2 decades. Of course, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I would love to see you. We arranged to meet the next day at a cafe near Stanford Hospital, where she worked. I barely slept that night, wondering what she wanted to discuss, hoping that whatever she had discovered wouldn't change her memories of me, wouldn't taint the relationship we had once shared. I dressed carefully in my best clothes, wanting to look professional and capable, wanting her to see that I had made something of my life despite the sacrifices I had made. The cafe was busy when I arrived, full of medical professionals grabbing coffee between shifts. I spotted Emma immediately, sitting at a corner table, and my breath caught in my throat. She was beautiful, this little girl who had grown into a confident woman. She had her mother's elegant features and her father's determined expression, and she was wearing a white coat with her name embroidered on the pocket, Dr. Emma Chen, Pediatric Pulmonology. She stood when she saw me, and for a moment we just looked at each other across the crowded cafe. Then she closed the distance between us and pulled me into a tight embrace, and I felt tears spring to my eyes because she was real and alive and healthy. This child I had helped save. Auntie Maria, she whispered, and the sound of that old nickname nearly broke me. We sat down, and she ordered us both coffee, and for a few minutes we made small talk, catching up on the years that had passed. She told me about medical school, about her residency, about choosing pulmonology because of her own childhood struggles with her lungs. I told her about my nursing degree, about my work in hospice care, about my sister's family. We were both dancing around the real reason for this meeting, both knowing there was something more important to discuss, but neither wanting to rush toward it. Finally, Emma took a deep breath and pulled a folder from her bag. I need to show you something, she said, opening it to reveal what looked like medical records and pharmacy receipts. Last month, my mother was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. She's going to be fine. The prognosis is excellent. But during her treatment planning, we were going through all of her old medical records and insurance documents to establish her medical history. That's when I found these. She spread several documents across the table, and I saw my own name on them, saw the pharmacy receipts for Emma's medication, saw the dates spanning those crucial months when I had been paying for her prescriptions. My hands began to tremble. The pharmacy had kept records of all the transactions, Emma continued, her voice thick with emotion. They showed that someone named Maria Santos had been paying cash for my medication every month for almost 2 years. I asked my parents about it, and they were shocked. They had no idea. They thought it was an insurance error, a glitch in the system. They never knew that you were the one keeping me alive. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the documents, at the evidence of my secret laid bare after all these years. I did some research, Emma said softly. I talked to some of the other Filipino women who worked in our neighborhood back then. They told me about your mother, about how you were trying to save money for her surgery. They told me she died while you were working for us. She paused, and when I looked up, I saw tears streaming down her face. You used your mother's surgery money to pay for my medication, didn't you? You sacrificed your own mother to save me. It wasn't like that, I said, my voice breaking. Your mother didn't die because of you. She died because her heart was too damaged. The surgery might not have worked anyway. I made a choice, Emma. I chose to help a child who needed help. That's what my mother taught me to do. That's what she would have wanted. But you lost her, Emma said, reaching across the table to take my hands. You lost your mother because you saved me. How can I ever repay that? How can I ever make that right? You don't need to repay anything, I said firmly. You don't owe me anything. I did what I did because it was right. Because you were a baby who needed help. Because I couldn't stand by and watch you suffer when I had the power to prevent it. Seeing you now, seeing the person you've become, seeing that you've dedicated your life to helping children with lung conditions just like you had, that's all the repayment I could ever want. But Emma was shaking her head, pulling more documents from her folder. I can't accept that, she said. I won't accept that. You gave up everything for me, and I need to do something to honor that sacrifice, to honor your mother's memory. So I've made some arrangements. She slid a document across the table, and I saw it was a check, made out to me, for an amount that made my vision blur. $150,000. Emma, no, I gasped. I can't accept this, it's too much. I didn't do what I did for money. I know you didn't, she said. That's exactly why you deserve it. This isn't payment for what you did. This is a gift from someone whose life you saved, from someone who wants to honor the sacrifice your mother made. She gave up her surgery so that you could save me. The least I can do is make sure that sacrifice meant something, that it created something good in the world. I was crying now, unable to stop the tears. What would I do with this money? I asked helplessly. Whatever you want, Emma said, smiling through her own tears. But I have some suggestions. I know you've been working in hospice care, and I know you're passionate about helping Filipino immigrants access health care. What if we started a foundation together? We could call it the Rosa Santos Foundation, after your mother. We could provide medical care assistance to immigrant families who can't afford treatment for their children. We could help other families avoid the impossible choices you had to make. I stared at her, this brilliant, compassionate woman who had grown from the fragile baby I had held in my arms. You want to start a foundation? With me? I want to create something that honors what you did, what your mother taught you, what you taught me even though I was too young to remember it, Emma said. I want to make sure that no other Maria Santos has to choose between saving her own mother and saving someone else's child. I want to make sure that no other family has to watch their child suffer because they can't afford medication. Will you help me do that? I couldn't speak. I could only nod, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was offering, by the way my secret sacrifice had somehow come full circle after all these years. Emma reached into her folder one more time and pulled out a photograph. It was old and faded, showing a young woman holding a tiny baby, both of them looking at the camera with expressions of love and trust. My mother gave this to me, she said. It's you and me, when I was about 3 months old. She said you used to sing to me in Filipino, that I would only calm down for you. She said you loved me like I was your own daughter. I took the photograph with shaking hands, remembering that day, remembering the weight of Emma's small body in my arms, remembering the fierce protective love I had felt for this child. I did love you, I whispered. I do love you. You were worth every sacrifice. You are worth every sacrifice. We sat in that cafe for 3 more hours, talking about the foundation we would create, about the families we would help, about the legacy we would build together. Emma told me about her work at Stanford, about the children she treated who reminded her of herself, about her determination to make sure every child had access to the care they needed, regardless of their family's financial situation. I told her about my mother, about the values she had instilled in me, about the lessons she had taught me about compassion and sacrifice, and the fundamental dignity of every human being. As we were preparing to leave, Emma hugged me again, holding on tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for being the kind of person who would sacrifice everything for a child who wasn't even yours. Thank you for showing me what real compassion looks like. Thank you for becoming exactly the kind of person my mother would have been proud to know I helped save," I replied. "Thank you for making my sacrifice mean something." The Rosa Santos Foundation launched 6 months later, with Emma as medical director and me as executive director. We started small, helping a handful of Filipino immigrant families access medications and treatments they couldn't afford. But word spread quickly through the community, and within a year we were helping dozens of families. Within 2 years, we had expanded to serve immigrants from all backgrounds, providing not just medication assistance, but also health education, insurance navigation, and connection to community resources. Emma's parents were overwhelmed when they learned the truth about what I had done all those years ago. Mrs. Chen cried for an hour straight, apologizing over and over for not knowing, for not being able to repay me sooner. But I told her the same thing I had told Emma, that I didn't do it for repayment, that I did it because it was right, because their daughter needed help and I had the power to provide it. Mr. Chen became one of the foundation's biggest donors, using his success in the tech industry to fund our operations and expand our reach. The foundation grew beyond anything I could have imagined. Emma's reputation in the medical community brought in other doctors who volunteered their time. My connections in the nursing and immigrant communities brought in families who needed help. We created partnerships with pharmaceutical companies to provide medication at reduced costs. We trained community health workers to help families navigate the complex healthcare system. We advocated for policy changes that would make healthcare more accessible to immigrant families. 5 years after our reunion, the Rosa Santos Foundation was serving over 500 families a year and had helped thousands of children access the medical care they needed. We had prevented countless cases of permanent damage from treatable conditions. We had saved lives. We had honored my mother's memory in a way that would have made her proud. Emma and I became close friends, more like family than former employer and employee. She invited me to her wedding when she married another doctor she met during her residency. I was there when she had her first child, a beautiful baby girl she named Rosa, after my mother. I held little Rosa in my arms and sang her the same Filipino lullabies I had sung to her mother, and I felt my own mother's presence in the room, felt her joy at seeing how her lessons about compassion had rippled out across generations. On the 10th anniversary of the Foundation's launch, we held a celebration at Stanford Hospital. Hundreds of families we had helped attended, along with donors, volunteers, and medical professionals who supported our work. Emma gave a speech about the Foundation's origins, about the housekeeper who had sacrificed her own mother's surgery money to save a stranger's child, about the lesson that one act of kindness could change the world in ways we could never predict. "Maria Santos taught me something crucial," Emma said, looking directly at me from the podium. "She taught me that compassion isn't about grand gestures or public recognition. It's about the quiet choices we make when no one is watching, about the sacrifices we make for others even when there's no reward, about the fundamental belief that every human life has value and dignity." My mother, Rosa Santos, taught her daughter those values, and her daughter lived them so completely that she changed my life and the lives of thousands of other children. This foundation exists because one woman believed that a sick baby's life was worth more than her own mother's surgery, And because that baby grew up determined to honor that sacrifice by helping other families avoid those impossible choices, I sat in the audience, crying openly, surrounded by families whose children were alive and healthy because of the work we had done together. I thought about my mother, about the lessons she had taught me, about the choice I had made in that small room off the Chen family's kitchen 28 years earlier. I had thought I was choosing between my mother's life and Emma's life, but I had been wrong. I had been choosing what kind of person I would be, what kind of world I would help create, what kind of legacy I would leave behind. My mother's death had been heartbreaking and unfair, and I still grieved for her every day. But her values had lived on through me, and through Emma, and through the thousands of children we had helped. Her compassion had rippled out across decades, touching lives she would never know, creating change she could never have imagined. That was the real measure of a life well lived, not in years or wealth or recognition, but in the love and kindness that continued to grow long after we were gone. After the celebration, Emma and I stood together in the hospital garden, watching the sun set over the Stanford campus. Little Rosa was playing nearby, chasing butterflies with some of the other children, her laughter bright and clear in the evening air. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked quietly. "The choice you made? Losing your mother?" I thought about the question carefully, wanting to give her an honest answer. "I regret that my mother died," I said finally. "I regret that I couldn't save her. I regret that she never got to see America, never got to meet you, never got to see what her lessons created. But I don't regret the choice I made. I couldn't have lived with myself if I had let you suffer when I had the power to help. My mother taught me that we're all connected, that someone else's suffering diminishes us all, that we have a responsibility to help each other. She would have made the same choice I did. In fact, she did make that choice, over and over throughout her life. I was just following her example." Emma put her arm around my shoulders, and we stood together in comfortable silence, watching the children play. "I'm going to make sure Rosa knows this story," she said. "I'm going to make sure she understands what you sacrificed, what her namesake taught you, what it means to live with compassion and integrity. I'm going to raise her to be the kind of person who would make the same choice you did. That's all any of us can do," I said. "Pass on the lessons we've learned. Teach the next generation to be kind, to be brave, to choose compassion even when it costs us everything. That's how we change the world, one choice at a time, one child at a time, one act of kindness at a time." As the sun disappeared below the horizon and the garden filled with the soft glow of twilight, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. My mother was gone, but her spirit lived on in the work we were doing, in the children we were saving, in the values we were passing down to the next generation. I had made an impossible choice all those years ago, but it had turned out to be the right choice after all, not because of what I gained, but because of what I helped create. A world with a little more compassion, a little more justice, a little more love. Emma's daughter Rosa ran up to us, breathless and happy, and wrapped her small arms around my legs. "Auntie Maria, will you sing me the butterfly song?" she asked. And I smiled because it was the same song I had sung to her mother decades earlier, the same song my own mother had sung to me when I was small. "Of course, little one," I said, picking her up and holding her close. As I sang the old Filipino lullaby, I felt my mother's presence surrounding us, felt her approval, felt her love reaching across time and distance to embrace us all. This was her legacy, this love, this compassion, this unbreakable connection between generations. This was what it meant to live a life that mattered. The Rosa Santos Foundation continues to grow and serve families to this day. Emma is now one of the leading pediatric pulmonologists in the country, using her position to advocate for healthcare access for all children, regardless of their family's financial situation. I'm still executive director of the foundation, though I'm getting older now and training the next generation of leaders to take over when I'm gone. We've helped over 10,000 families, saved countless children's lives, and created a model that other organizations across the country are replicating. But more than the numbers, more than the success, what matters most is the lesson at the heart of everything we do. One act of kindness, one sacrifice made in secret, one choice to help a stranger's child can echo across decades and change the world in ways we never imagined. My mother taught me that lesson, I lived it, and Emma is passing it on to the next generation. That's the real miracle. Not that I saved Emma's life, but that Emma took that gift and multiplied it 1,000 times over, creating a legacy of compassion that will continue long after both of us are gone. Sometimes I visit my mother's grave in Manila when I travel back to the Philippines. I tell her about Emma, about little Rosa, about the foundation that bears her name. I tell her about all the children we've helped, all the families we've served, all the love we've spread in her memory. I like to think she knows, that somehow she can see what her lessons created, that she's proud of the choice I made, even though it cost her life. Because in the end, that's what love is. It's choosing someone else's well-being over your own comfort. It's sacrificing what you want for what someone else needs. It's believing that we're all connected, that we all matter, that every life has infinite value and deserves to be protected and cherished. My mother taught me that, and I taught Emma, and Emma is teaching Rosa, and together we're teaching thousands of other families that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength, it's courage, it's the most powerful force for change in the world. What an incredible journey Maria took from that small room off the Chen family's kitchen to becoming the executive director of a foundation that has saved thousands of lives. Her story reminds us that the most meaningful acts of kindness are often the ones done in secret, with no expectation of recognition or reward, simply because they're the right thing to do. Have you ever made a sacrifice for someone else that they never knew about? Have you ever discovered that someone helped you in ways you never realized? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear about the hidden acts of kindness in your own life. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that compassion can echo across generations, creating change in ways we never imagined, please show your support by hitting that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss our inspiring stories about real people whose courage and kindness changed their lives and the lives of others. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.